former leader of UKIP. How are you?
I'm very well, Nick. Thank you very much.
Today. I'm feeling a bit scruffy.
I'm sorry.
I mean, for those that are watching, I mean, it's a beautiful gold tie. I mean, I'll give a sartorial rundown of you. Are you off for an interview or something?
No, only your interview, Nick. I for the occasion, you see.
Well, now listen. Let's kick off with a question that I'm asking everyone today. This has been prompted by two Conservative MPs from the One Nation side of the party. One day I'll say, what is a One Nation Tory? We'll dig into that.
Yeah.
But they are arguing that if Rwanda gets bogged down, i.e. the flights don't take off, which we're assured won't be the case by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the debate should be, we should stay within the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, and reform it. Do you think it is possible to reform the ECHR?
Anything's possible if there's the will to do it, but this isn't just about the will of the United Kingdom and the United Kingdom government. It's about the will of the other 45 signatories to the Convention on Human Rights. And there have been multiple attempts to reform the European Court of Human Rights, but those have been primarily orientated towards its efficiency, because at the moment I think they're sort of they're around about 60,000 cases in backlog. So they're having a problem.
Well, that's because everyone, the cat, the cleaners,
everybody,
everyone, whatever it is,
everybody's going for it.
I'm being asked to work 8 hours a day. I shouldn't be. I'll go to the European Court of Human Rights. I want to work from home. I should, even though I'm contracted to. My human rights are being exploited.
I work in the Home Office, and I don't want to work in the office.
Well, or the ONS now, isn't it? They're going on strike because they don't want to do 2 days a week at home.
But the other thing is that, I mean, we have to recognise two fundamental problems with any sort of such international agreement. They take a long time to negotiate in the first place, and generally they are negotiated in urgent circumstances. So, for example, this in the aftermath of World War II, trying to sort Europe out afterwards. So a lot of drive there to get something done. And when you then try to reopen a convention, something like the European Convention on Human Rights or any other agreement or treaty, then we might want to open it and change X, Y, and Z elements of it. Another country will want to open other bits of it. A third country will, and so on. And so you end up with a very long, very difficult negotiating process, and quite possibly at the end of it, everybody gives up anyway. So the
in theory, yes, but in reality, probably very difficult to do.
And even if we could do it, I have absolutely no doubt that it would take years to achieve.
Well, interesting, I did read, and the proof will be over the next few days and weeks actually, is that they've already themselves modified this right to intervene with the slapping the injunction on things leaving at the last minute. And I don't fully appreciate it, and we'll be talking to a guest about this at 2 o'clock. Paul Diamond is a barrister who I'll be chatting to him about this very question. But I think that they're already trying to rein it in a little bit, because they must perceive a threat to themselves. We are not the only country that has issues with the ECHR.
No, we're not. But it's a very... I don't know that the supertanker analogy is quite the correct one, but it's a very difficult, heavy thing to change. And you bear this in mind as well. You've got countries that are trying to accede to the European Union in various stages. They're all being told that you've got to sign up to this, and you've got, and then that all changes as well. There's a lot of work to be done. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, but let me press you on this though.
Yeah.
Say the answer is, and I'm asking all of you here, is it possible to reform the ECHR? If the answer is no, let's pull out, well, by all means share that with me, 0344 499 1000. But pulling out is not as simple as it sounds. This ECHR is embedded in so many of our laws. It's not actually easy to get out of, is it?
No, but it would be easier for us to do that than for every one of the 46 signatories to do that.
We haven't pulled out of half the EU laws.
No, I agree. But again, it comes back to the will to do it. Now, and why are you doing it? And now, if it's because the convention or the court is stopping us sending people to Rwanda, well, is that the best way to deal with this? is Rwanda even going to work in itself? So you've got all these complex matters. Now, I happen to think that it is worth the United Kingdom running a really high-level exercise in what are the implications of leaving, because it's all very good, you and I or anybody else saying, look, if we were to be free
and
of
when we say leaving, by the way, we want to be very clear about it. We're talking about leaving the European Court of Human Rights, because we were talking a little bit about the EU there. I don't want people to think we're back to that.
No.
We have left, although it doesn't feel like it at times.
But there are conditions for joining the EU that relate to a country's...
The European Court of Human Rights,
correct,
yes,
and
been signed up to it.
Correct.
Yeah, but I suppose that the logic goes, neither route is easy to do. Therefore, what do we actually gain by going through the pain of leaving if, for example, as Rishi Sunak's government have demonstrated, we don't know quite the outcome, he's demonstrated you can fight back, you can push back, you can write laws that get approved in your parliament to allow you, in theory, to get around the ECHR. Maybe that's the future.
Yes, although this is such a complicated issue, because the Rwanda safety bill that we're talking about here, I think, actually then refers, we've still got the fact that in UK law, UK courts, not European courts of any sort, but UK courts have to take into consideration, when assessing asylum claims or appeals, they have to take into consideration decisions and guidance already made by the European Court of Human Rights. So in our own legislation, nobody else's, this isn't the European Convention, this isn't anything else to do with any country or any entity apart from the United Kingdom Parliament, who passed the act that includes the fact that British courts must... that appeal... The appeal...
But we could row back on that.
Well, we could do. We've then got to change the legislation on that, which of course we can do. Yeah. And I think this is where I've got concerns about the Rwanda bill, because there are gaps in it, there are loopholes in it, which I'm sure will be exploited. That said, I think, in the context of the Rwanda flights, I do believe that flights will take off this year, because my understanding is the government has already found sufficient volunteers who are getting £3,000 apiece to volunteer to go to Rwanda. And so the flights will go, but the moment you enter compulsion into the equation, in other words, forced movement to Rwanda...
Let's not get buried in the detail there. I'm just going to read out this message from Phil. Blair enshrined the European Court of Human Rights into UK law. Why can't we repeal that decision, then just ignore the ECHR like some European countries do, to the rulings they don't like? If France can deport someone who disrespected the French flag in 12 hours, they ignored his right to a family life, so why can't we? It's legitimate. But that proves the points. We don't have to pull out in that sense,
we don't.
Do we?
We don't. And so that people know that if you ignore a decision by the court, the Council of Ministers of the 46 signatories to the Convention can then make a decision to somehow boycott or sanction that country. Now, there are thousands of cases where other countries have ignored the decisions. It is, again, a matter of political will as to whether or not we want to
do that. Yeah, indeed. 0344 499 1000. Do you think actually pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights is the right thing to do, or, given everything Henry's been through and the complexities of actually doing it, and the proof, as the French have demonstrated, that you don't actually need to pull out to actually effectively ignore it, I think is probably pretty accurate a way to do it. Is that enough? Is it possible to actually reform the ECHR? 0344 499 1000. I'm also asking about the Australian health system, particularly if you've had experience of it or know people who've had experience of it. Sajid Javid, he has actually argued that that is a system we should look at here in the United Kingdom, and that it will meet the problems of our NHS. I think we can all probably agree the NHS needs reform, but is actually going to a model that embraces both private sector and access for all, which is what happens in Australia to healthcare. free at the point of delivery, incidentally, in the absolute main line of treatments, 0344 499 1000. Wendy's already pushed back on this idea. She says, Tories have always wanted to get rid of the NHS. I love it when people say that. The Tories have been in power for so many years. I mean, they've had 14 years here. They had 18 years under Margaret Thatcher and John Major. And yet, apparently, we've always wanted to get rid of the NHS, and yet we presided over, and Wendy, I think this might come as a bit of a shock to you, so sit down, is that we've presided over another 55 billion quid a year in funding to the NHS since 2010. Anyway, these numpties, you go on to say, should know those who can't afford to pay for healthcare will be off work longer. Whoops, silly Tories, no fiscal common sense. And unfortunately, this is when you get into the debate on healthcare. People hear, in a way, what they want to hear, and I understand that. I'm not being disrespectful of that. But the brutal truth is, as I said, in Australia, there is access for all to healthcare, and you don't have to pay for it. That's the point. There is this Tier 2 system that's on top of it, as Sajid Javid was saying, that many people have subscribed to in Australia. And there's a lot of people, apparently our doctors think it's a good system. You know, the ones who are always talking about how wonderful the NHS is, they're quite happy to clear off to Australia.
But that's probably because they get paid more or something.
Probably, quite possibly.
But, you know, Australia's not the only country that does this.
No, of course not.
I lived in Austria for 7 years. They run a similar sort of system, and I think actually we're starting from the wrong start point here. Look, we all, if we are prepared to acknowledge it, understand that the NHS is probably far more complex than it is in its structure. It's a mess. There are good reasons why that's occurred. Over the years, there have been advances in medical technology and so on, which have required new budgets and new structures and all the rest of it. And it's been a massive evolution. Perhaps it is time, I think it is, to consolidate all of that. But how do you do it? I don't think it's appropriate to go and look at Australia and say, well, look, the Australian system works, or the Austrian one, or the Japanese one, or the anything else one, because the UK is pretty unique. Every country and community is. So what we've got to do, I think, and it's a long game, but again, it's back down to this same old thing. It's down to political will. I think we need to look at how patient outcomes around the world, how they are. Does Japan do particularly well in one area, and Austria in another, and Australia in another? And then how do they fund these things?
Well, I can give you the answer to that, because it's in the British Commonwealth Survey of Health, comparable nations, the top 10. Guess what we come number 1 for, right? Access to healthcare. Guess where we come 9 and 10th for compared to the countries like Australia, Canada and America? Outcomes? We're 9th, second from bottom. And all those other systems are doing much better than us.
Indeed. So we need to look at them, and we need to look at how they're funded. Because, look, you know, there are other countries, I'm sure, that have better outcomes in some areas, although the population is less wealthy. That all needs to be looked at. We need to then design, if you like, a new health service around that, around patient outcomes and funding methods, and then we need to design the transition across and then move through it.